right, and welcome back. And with us, we have Rebecca Brewster with ATRI. Hi, Rebecca. How are you doing this morning?
Morning, Dave. I'm doing great.
All right, it's so nice to see you again. Welcome back. We are so
Thank
excited.
you.
Before we get started, let's once again introduce ATRI and what you do at ATRI and who you are and what ATRI does.
Absolutely. And we go by ATRI. We call ourselves ATRI.
ATRI, I'm
So
sorry.
we are the trucking industry's not-for-profit research organization. And the work that we do on behalf of the industry really covers the landscape. Everything from safety topics to driver issues to regulatory issues to how the industry impacts the environment. We do a lot in traffic congestion and how to improve mobility. So it really is a full suite of research topics that we are continuously working on in fulfillment of ATRI's mission, which is to improve the trucking industry's safety and productivity. And I've been with ATRI just over 29 years, so I've spent most of my adult career with this organization. I've been president of ATRI since 2002. We've got a great team of researchers that are around the country. I'm based in Atlanta, where I have several of our team here with me in Atlanta. We also have staff in Minneapolis, in Sacramento, and New York City. So we're covering the bases around the country to make sure we get all the research done to make our great industry better.
Well, I'll tell you what, of all of those, I think Minneapolis is probably the best with traffic. All the others, I'm not really excited about New York, Atlanta, or LA, but I will tell you that I am excited that you're here. You know, I've come to learn a lot more about your organization and what it does, and it's very interesting how important your information is that's given to not only the industry itself, but also the lawmakers, right? I mean, you help provide that information to our legislation.
Absolutely. So, in fulfillment of our mission, we make our research available to anyone who's interested. You can download any of our studies from our website. But what we have found is that not only does the industry use the research to improve individual fleet operations or whatever the case may be, but yes, particularly when we do an analysis looking at the impact of new regulations, that research makes its way all the way to Congress. We have been very successful in seeing our research at play in positive changes to the hours of service rules. We've seen our research at play when the federal government and state DOTs are looking at where to invest infrastructure dollars to improve those traffic problems out there. So we really are proud of the work we do and how it has been able to move the needle for improving safety and productivity in the industry.
Well, I'll tell you, Rebecca, in response to that, directly when it becomes the hours of service, I don't believe that I've seen a better or more positive change for drivers in the last hours of service rules than I had seen since the new rules began with the split sleepers and the extended service hours. I think those have benefited better than ever. But I can't even. I look back and I look at my career and I can't remember a time in which all the rules that came out underneath the hours of service regulations actually helped the drivers more in regards to fatigue than those came out. What was it last September? Is that right?
Last September, you're right. And you know, it's interesting because when I started in the industry, I actually started with a private truck fleet. And that was back in the days in the 80s when drivers could split at that time it was a 10-hour driving day, and they could go 5 and 5. And we ran team operations, and our drivers would go 5 and 5, one in the sleeper, one driving. And certainly starting back, 2005 was the first time we got the first change to the hours of service rules. And for a while there, I felt like the hours of service rules were the full employment act for ATRI because we were studying every single change that came out. And you think back to that sort of egregious change where to utilize the 34-hour restart drivers had to have 2 overnight periods from 1 a.m. to 5
Oh, that was a
a.m.
nightmare.
It was a nightmare, and it was really problematic. And we were able to show through data collection from drivers by doing some analyses with our truck GPS data, just how really problematic that was for drivers. And you know, drivers reporting that they were more fatigued because of those rules, not less fatigued. And those are rules that are designed to provide drivers an opportunity to rest. And so really problematic. But you're right, with the latest changes that have come out, I think we are really in a good place with the hours of service rules.
I agree 100%. I think they've, and there's always great room for improvement. There's always an opportunity to do better, but I think this was a great jump spot for us. And let's talk a little bit more about fatigue. Let's talk about driver fatigue for a minute. You've done several studies on this. Let's run down some of them and what you have found.
Well, certainly, one of the biggest activities we've been involved in over the years has been initiatives focused on driver health and wellness, and that is certainly fatigue is a part of that. We were part of the original team with FMCSA to develop and Transport Canada, what is now called the North American Fatigue Management Program. And that took the best of the best in terms of what research was out there on sleep need and sleep hygiene and when you can rest and when it's not as advantageous to rest, and really pulled all that together into a training course. And it's a training course that is still available online for drivers. It's got a training module for driver managers, because how you dispatch drivers and what you do and how you interact with drivers is important. It's got a module that teaches shippers about their role in driver fatigue and how they can help mitigate that situation. It's even got a module for families, because while you may be under the hours of service rules when you are out on the road, what you do when you are off duty at home has an impact on your fatigue levels when you're out on the road. And certainly your family plays a role in that. And so helping your family understand how important it is that you get the rest you need when you are off the road will help you improve your safety on the road. But there's no question, Dave, that there are so many contributors to fatigue while the driver is out on the road, from traffic congestion and detention at facilities that stresses you out because you're not able to get to your next appointment. A whole host of issues that contribute to driver fatigue. And we have learned over the years through a number of research studies that it is challenging oftentimes. We are our own worst enemies in terms of identifying when we're tired. We always think other people are fatigued, but we don't necessarily recognize it in ourselves. And that's when drivers of cars and trucks get into trouble, when you don't recognize that you are tired and need to pull over and rest.
You know, and you talk about that, and as you've spoken to drivers and done the research, we're talking about genuine denial, right? When you just say, "Hey, I'm fine. I'm fine. I got this. I got this a little bit more," and it's not until we turn around and look back and go, "Man, I can't believe I drove. I was exhausted." And when you do studies and you see that, it is about being honest, right? It is about being honest with yourself and things like that. When you've done your research to drivers, do you find about fatigue, and you talk about the deny? Are they pretty good? Do they open up pretty well in your research about their own fatigue?
Well, drivers will say oftentimes, and this is so spot on, that it's so many externalities that create that fatigue for them. The demands of the customers, and like I said, traffic congestion, all these other things that the driver cannot necessarily control. And so it is hard, because you're a professional and you want to get your job done and you want to do it well. So it is hard to, step back and say, wow, I really need to take a break. So many people are saying you've got to get here at this time, and now you've hit Atlanta at the worst time of day, and you're stuck in traffic, and that creates more fatigue because you're stressed out. But I think drivers are becoming more and more aware of how important getting proper sleep is as best they can. It raises a whole nother issue that we could spend a whole nother show on, and that's talking about where do drivers get that rest, because there's not adequate truck parking. But Dave, I have a personal experience with this, growing up with a parent who just denied that he was tired all the time. And when we would be on family road trips, we knew we were in trouble when Daddy had one hand on the steering wheel, started slapping his arm to try and wake himself up. And we knew, uh-oh, we wish Mom would take the wheel now, because it's scary. So,
Oh
and,
my
and,
goodness!
and honestly, to really highlight how impactful that was, my father never touched a drop of alcohol in his entire life.
Right?
And twice, when we were in the car with him, he got pulled over by law enforcement because he was weaving, because he was tired.
Wow. And you talk about that. That I'll tell you, it's interesting to know. I will tell you, and to go back to your comment a second ago about family understanding how important it is you get rest. You know, when I would come home off the road, there was a litany of lists of things to get done. And that first day out, I was exhausted from the weekend trying to get all of those to do, that honeydew list completed before I got back on the road. My first day out was never my best day, I can tell you
No,
that.
and understandably so. And I travel tremendously extensively for my job, and so I know that my husband has to deal with everything at home when I'm on the road, and so I feel for the partner or spouse who stays at home because they have to manage everything at home. But the family needs to understand that when mom or dad comes in from being out on the road, they have to have an opportunity to get that rest for their safety and for your safety too, so that when they go back out on the road, you don't have that first day where you can't even see straight because you're so exhausted from what you did when you were at home.
Absolutely. All right, so let's talk about, and I think one of the main key parts we were going to talk about today was detention. I think why don't you kind of go through? We all know as drivers and people in the industry, we all know what detention is, but kind of go how you went about your study and what you went and what questions you were trying to resolve.
So we did 2 years worth of data collection because we really wanted to get a longitudinal or a several year look at how impactful detention is. And so we did data collection in 2014 from motor carriers and from truck drivers, everything about detention, how long you were incurring it, what types of facilities you were in, at which you were experiencing detention, because some types of customers are more uh, infamous, if you will, for a longer detention than others. And then we repeated that data collection in 2018, and across the board, what we saw was more frequent detention and longer detention. And so the situation was getting worse, not better. And what's surprising about that is in between the time periods, you got the ELD mandate. And so you would think that when a driver has a way to electronically record how long they're being held up, that would now provide proof, if you will, to the customers. You are holding our trucks up excessively for an excessively long time. But that was not the case. And detention got, as I said, more frequent and extended in length. And what we found is, in fact, that the female professional drivers in our data set actually experienced longer detention than the males in our data set,
That's
which was a
crazy.
surprising finding.
Yeah, that's absolutely crazy. I will tell you, Rebecca, and I'm going to tell you from a personal note that when we ran paper logs or when I was on paper, we always found time, right? So we always were able to have time to get loaded, have time to on our logs to get loaded, to get empty, and to find a truck stop. But when the ELD mandate came out, that wasn't always the case because we weren't able, because no longer was it a 15-minute increment on the log. It bumped all the way down to the second. And we weren't able to find that spot or that time like we could before because it really was an accurate accounting of what was going on at the shipper and receivers. It plays into that. I think the ELD does do a great job in recording that data necessary to understand how important that time is. Have we gotten to the point yet where we know and understand what it means to be driver friendly for the shippers and receivers?
Well, you certainly wish we would be to that point, but I'm afraid we're not there yet. And I have done interview after interview after interview and presentation after presentation after presentation where I've really harped on this issue. If you are a shipper or a receiver and you are entirely dependent on the trucking industry to move your product, you need to treat those men and women who drive professionally like they are gods, because they are, and they are moving your freight. And we have got to do what it takes to make sure that they are treated the way they should be, with the respect that they've earned for all that they do for this nation's economy. It seems like a no-brainer, but unfortunately, we still see places where that does not always occur. And so, it's such a problem. Detention is such a problem that as part of the infrastructure bill, we've got a new detention study that FMCSA is going to undertake to look at, like we did in our study, how impactful detention is, and is there a relationship between detention and driver safety. I will tell you that ATRI's Research Advisory Committee, the group that determines what research we should be doing, I just met last week in Dallas, and without giving away our secrets yet, because we have to take this list of priority topics to the ATRI board, but I will tell you that detention got a lot of attention by the Research Advisory Committee, and I think you can be looking for additional research on detention out of ATRI in the near future.
Well, and by the way, Rebecca, the next time you're in Dallas, you need to make sure you contact us and let us know, because we would love to have you here and in studio, maybe, and not that you're not in studio now but virtually, but we would like to have you here as a guest anytime you're in the area next time you come, and I invite you to do so. Let me ask you a simple question. We as drivers, and we in the industry, we understand it. Do you think that the shippers and receivers just don't get that they play a big part in the safety of the drivers on the road? Do you think that they get it yet, or they don't get it yet?
It seems to us in the industry such an intuitive thing, but I really think we've got to do more to connect the dots between what happens safety-wise on the road and how drivers are treated at customer facilities. I'm hopeful that we can play a role in that with our research, but the industry as a whole needs to really, focus on this topic, because in our annual survey of the industry's top issues, driver shortage has been number one for a number of years. You look over at the driver side of the equation, it's compensation and truck parking, but number two, they tied for number one in this most recent survey, but number two is detention. So as I always make the point, if you are a motor carrier and your number one concern is driver shortage and your number two concern is driver retention, you better understand and do what you can about the things that drivers say are important. That's compensation, truck parking, and detention. And particularly with as tight as capacity is right now, as a trucking fleet, you do have some bargaining power with your customers because capacity is so tight. And so, working with your customers to make sure they understand your drivers are a valuable asset, they need to be treated with the respect that they've earned and deserve.
Rebecca, you've said you talk with respect, and you talk about it a lot, and I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for making sure that that's a key issue. Not only are we talking about the safety of the people on the road, but also treating drivers with respect that they deserve. Man, what a great you've said that several times, and man, that warms my heart. Is it important that we talk to, and I'm going to ask this, do you think at some point we should be targeting, or we should really go back to the shippers and receivers, and if they are not good with detention and they're not good to the drivers, that they should ultimately, it should hit their pocketbook? I mean, don't you agree? And then when they ask why, give them the data points to show them why. Do you think that's how the best way to get their attention? If they're not going to listen to the safety, is it the pocketbook that we go to and get to?
Well, and certainly hitting them in the pocketbook is a impactful way across the economy for folks. And in our detention research that we have done, it was interesting. We found that the average amount that fleets are collecting for detention, when they are collecting detention from their customers for holding their drivers up, the average amount still did not equate to what was that year our average cost per hour to operate a truck. So we've been doing this operational cost of trucking data collection for years, where we collect data from trucking fleets to understand how much it costs to operate a truck per mile and per hour. And the average amount collected per hour of detention did not even equal the average amount to operate that truck. So you're still in a losing proposition as a fleet when you are able to collect detention. And Dave, the other problem there is we found that for the most part, small fleets were not willing to press their customers on this detention collection, right, because they don't want to lose the business. They didn't want to lose the business. And so that put them at a competitive disadvantage with the larger fleets who have more economic power to be able to negotiate with their customers to collect that detention.
Yeah, it's definitely a data point. I hope to the day comes when we all, and I'm just going to ask you, when we all in this industry, both shipper, receiver, company, driver, we all share equally in the responsibility of being out there on the road. And to me, I think it's necessary. We have all these nuclear verdicts or these legislation and these lawsuits that come about that go after the motor carrier. But when is the day going to come when we all share equally in the responsibility of being out there on the road? Do you think that's ever a reality?
That chain of custody piece is really important because there's no one single activity that contributes to safety on the road. It is everyone has a stake in it, from how long a driver is held up at a facility, how well they are treated at that facility, to what they are encountering on the roadway, how the roadway is operated. So state DOTs, if they don't do well in first responders in clearing traffic incidents and create a situation where it becomes more dangerous while they're dealing with one incident and we get secondary crashes. So, I mean, everyone sort of has a piece of this. The motoring public, put down your telephone while you're driving. It is not a tool to be used while you are in control of a car. So, I mean, we all have a piece in this. And we really need to view this supply chain, which is the buzzword of the, decade right now. We all have a role in the supply chain and in the safety and efficiency of that supply chain.
Well, Ms. Brewster, I could talk to you for an hour on topics because you're so knowledgeable and helpful. But we've run out of time. I want to thank you for coming on and shedding light. You are always a welcome guest. You are welcome to come back. You will come back, correct?
I will come back, absolutely.
All right. And listen, before we go, before we get out of here, I want to make sure that everybody knows that you always have opportunities to get onto your website and to take surveys as drivers, because that's where you gather the information needed, correct? You need that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so where do they go to help out by giving their voice to your research?
It's real easy to remember because it's what we do. Truckingresearch.org is where you can find us. You can download copies of all of our studies, and we are always looking for driver and motor carrier input on a whole host of topics. And so I hope your listeners and viewers will check out our website today.
Thank you very much, and have a great day. And before you go, will you say really quickly, BCB Live, the safest station in the nation?
Of course. BCB Live, the safest station in the nation.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Brewster. Have a great day.
Thank you.
You're watching BCB Live, the safest station in the nation. BCB Live covers freight. Here we are now at 21% of record freight being rejected. News down in Texas. We're going to talk a little bit about this. We had another $1.5 million seizure. If ever there's a time to do a pre or post trip, it's if you're doing something wrong. Weather, traffic.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to some traffic and weather with Buckle Up Bob. You can kind of see where the visibility can be compromised a little bit. Again, right where that rain is.
And most importantly, safety.
One of the things that we must do is make sure that safety is the number one thing that we focus on.
Going into an intersection yellow is not the way. That's to clear an intersection, not to enter an intersection.
Tune in weekdays from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. Central Standard Time. You can watch BCB Live through LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook. So what are you waiting for? Subscribe today and follow BCB Live.